They're more than just leather-clad rebels on Harleys. These men have built a fearsome empire behind roaring engines and prison bars. The Hells Angels are more than just a motorcycle gang. They're a criminal powerhouse accused of running a ruthless criminal enterprise based on robbery, extortion, and cold-blooded murder. Even behind bars, some members command violence from within prison walls like generals of an underground war. They're fearsome leaders, known for ruthless revenge, iron-fisted control, and a code of silence that's feared even by themselves. In this video, we delve into the dark underworld of the most dangerous Hells Angels in prison. And trust us, the stories that got them there will haunt you. Christopher Ray Ray Raniieri, the enforcer who turned a motorcycle club into a crime machine. Christopher Ray Raniieri, the cold-blooded president of the Hells Angels Salem, Massachusetts chapter, built his reputation not on brotherhood, but on bloodshed. Raniieri was ruthless to the core. Not only did he lead, but he ruled by fear. And in 2014, he orchestrated a murder so meticulously planned and horrific that it cemented his place as one of the most feared angels in the club's history. It all started with a confrontation at a New Hampshire motorcycle event. To some, it was just a brawl, but to Raniieri, it was disrespect, and disrespect comes at a cost. Sonoma County's Joel Doughboy Silva was lured to the Fresno Club by false pretenses. What followed was straight out of a gangster movie. Silva was executed, his body burned in a crematorium, and his truck torched to clear him of any guilt. As if that weren't chilling enough, Raniieri flew across the country just to party at the scene of the crime, celebrating the attack as a twisted victory lap. Raniieri enforced the Hells Angels' brutal code with violence, intimidation, and a complete disregard for life. Federal prosecutors linked him to a vast racketeering network that included beatings, threats, and assassinations. In 2023, justice finally caught up. Raniieri was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder in support of organized crime. He now faces life behind bars. But his sentence didn't just take down one sadist. It exposed the brutal reality of the Hells Angels' inner world, where loyalty is demanded and betrayal is paid in blood. Raniieri wasn't the only monster in a leather vest, however, because the next man on our list left a trail of violence that shook the entire town to its core. By day, he was a suave Arizona stockbroker. By night, he was a ruthless outlaw who rode under the banner of the Hells Angels. Paul Eyeshide, some called Paul Idy, was the last person you'd think of as a murderer. Neat, successful, and articulate, he led what was considered a respectable life. But behind the tailored suit was a man who led a double life, one that would land him on the U.S. Marshal's 15 Most Wanted list. The nightmare began on October 27, 2001, at what was supposed to be a regular party at the Hells Angels Club in Mesa, Arizona. Cynthia Garcia, a mother of 6, had attended the gathering looking for fun. But after drinking and insulting the club, things took a terrifying turn. The bikers, driven by rage and revenge, brutally attacked her, tossed her into a car trunk, and left her for dead in the remote Arizona desert. 2 years later, a federal sting operation called Operation Black Biscuit exposed the dark underbelly of the Mesa chapter, exposing drug trafficking, brutal beatings, and a connection to Garcia's murder. Paul was charged, but incredibly, he was released on bail. Rather than face justice, he disappeared, removed his ankle monitor, and fled the country on a false passport. He lived on the run for years, hiding in Argentina under a stolen identity. Even after his arrest in 2011, Paul's story was once again distorted. Locals rallied to his defense, insisting he had started a new life with a family. But justice eventually caught up. By 2018, he was back in Arizona, this time in handcuffs, finally facing punishment for one of the most brutal crimes in Hells Angels history. Adam Lee Hall, the angel of death who silenced a witness and sparked a bloodbath. In the sleepy town of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, no one could have predicted the storm that was about to hit. But in August 2011, a nightmare began to unfold, one that would leave 3 men dead and a senior Hell's Angel, Adam Lee Hall, behind bars for life. David Glasser was just trying to do the right thing. After being beaten with a baseball bat by Hall, who suspected him of shoplifting, Glasser chose to speak up. He reported the attack, which led to a series of criminal charges against Hall, including drug and weapons charges. But Hall wasn't about to let it go. As Glasser prepared to testify in court, his name was added to the wanted list. On the eve of his trial, he disappeared, along with 2 of his closest friends, Edward Frampton, a Special Olympics athlete, and Robert Chadwell, a youth counselor. Their sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. 11 days later, the truth came out. All 3 men were found murdered, stuffed in plastic bags and thrown away like trash. Investigators determined Glasser was the prime target. Frampton and Chadwell, innocent bystanders, killed simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Justice was swift and harsh. Hall, along with 3 co-defendants, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom echoed with gasps as the brutality of the crime came to light, a chilling reminder that crossing a Hell's Angel can mean crossing the line between life and death. But Adam Lee Hall is just one link in the chain of chaos. The next name on our list leaves an even darker trail. George Weathern, Angels Vice President traitor. He started out as a high school dropout and became one of the most vocal whistleblowers in biker history. George Weathern, once the feared vice president of the Oakland chapter of the Hells Angels, lived fast, rode hard, and kept deadly secrets buried deep until things started happening to him. Growing up in Oakland, California, George's life went off the rails early. After a dishonorable discharge from the Air Force, he found his calling in the chaos, joining the Hells Angels and rising quickly. His rise was fueled by his close friendship with legendary President Sonny Barger, but the brotherhood he built would soon turn into a nightmare. By the early 1970s, George had left the club, or so he thought, because with the Angels, you never really leave. The past comes to a head when police discover 3 decomposing bodies buried on George's 156-acre Northern California ranch. One of them a woman, the others a former Angel who betrayed the club. The murders are brutal. The victims are believed to have been drugged with LSD-laced coffee, then dismembered and dumped down an abandoned well. Traces of violence point to a murderous argument between George and another biker, William Zorro Mitten, allegedly over drugs, money, and betrayal. The case is broken by an unlikely source, William Whispering Bill Piper, a dying former Angel turned informant. Hoping to spend his final days outside of prison, Piper leads police straight to George's ranch. What they find is chilling: guns, drugs, and whispers of more bodies buried on the property. Faced with overwhelming evidence, George made a move no one expected. He turned the tables. In a deal with the state, he testified against his former brothers, entered the Witness Protection Program, and disappeared from public life. But he didn't stay silent. George Weathern would go on to write Wayward Angel, a memoir that revealed the full brutality and violence of the Hells Angels. His testimony not only shocked the outlaw world, but also tore apart the myth of biker loyalty. And the bodies buried on his property? They were just the beginning. Think that's dark? Wait until you meet the next Angel, whose reign of terror left the town terrified and the court stunned. Chico Mora, the man who turned Arizona into Hells Angels. Before the Hells Angels roared across Arizona, the highways belonged to one man, Robert Chico Mora. Ruthless, fearless, and brutal to the core, Mora ruled the state as the leader of the notorious Dirty Dozen Motorcycle Club, a gang so feared that even law enforcement despised it. Their symbol was simple but chilling, black and white cobwebbed dice. But they represented chaos. Under Chico's command, the Dirty Dozen became a symbol of gunfights, drug dens, and the all-out domination of Arizona's outlaw biker scene. His legend grew with every brawl, every jailbreak, and every opponent crushed beneath his boots. Every year, thousands of bikers take part in the Dirty Dozen's infamous Florence prison escape, a bold public tribute to their imprisoned brethren. It's more than a ride, it's a message. Chico is in charge, and Arizona belongs to him. But in 1996, Mora did something even bigger. He orchestrated the historic switch of powers, the moment the Dirty Dozen officially merged with the Hells Angels. It was a bloodless takeover with dire consequences. Join the red and white or step aside. With that move, Chico didn't just cement his legacy, he took Arizona straight into the hands of the world's most feared biker gang. But the dominance came at a cost. By the late 80s, Chico's violent streak was beginning to emerge. He was convicted of a felony after a horrific shooting, and his criminal record only grew from there. Drug trafficking, illegal weapons, and countless criminal investigations. He evaded prison for years, protected by fear and loyalty. But in the end, his own body betrayed him. Health problems put him behind bars, closing the final chapter of a life built on breaking every rule in the book. Chico Mora didn't just lead the Dirty Dozen, he turned the desert into a battlefield. Brian Wayne Went, brutal Brotherhood enforcer. When Brian Wayne Went walks into a room, even Hell's Angels take notice, and not in a good way. As president of Salem Charter, Went doesn't just enforce the rules, he embodies the violence behind them. His name sends shivers down the spines of clubs across the country. But in July 2014, he crossed a line that shocked even the most hardened members of the outlaw fraternity. It all started in Laconia, New Hampshire, at a motorcycle parade, where Joel Doughboy Silva of Sonoma Charter got into a heated argument with another member. What seemed like a petty dispute was, in the eyes of the Angels, unforgivable disrespect. For Jonathan Nelson, president of the Fresno chapter, and Russell Taylor, head of the Sonoma chapter, the solution was clear: Silva had to go. And they knew exactly the man who could handle it: Brian Went. Silva had been lured to the Fresno club under the pretense of resolving the conflict. But there would be no peace talks. Once inside, Went carried out the assassination with terrifying precision. Silva was shot and killed on the spot. His body was cremated the next day. His truck was burned. The message? No betrayal goes unanswered. For years, the case lay buried, literally and figuratively. But in 2022, after an exhaustive investigation and a high-stakes trial, the truth finally came out. What was the motive? Silva was accused of having an affair with another member's wife, a crime the Hells Angels will not tolerate. Brian Went, along with Nelson and Taylor, was sentenced to life behind bars. He may have served the law, but the aftermath revealed a darker truth. Inside the Hells Angels, loyalty is deadly, and justice, when it comes, will be painful. Sonny Barger, godfather of the Hells Angels. He didn't just ride the Hells Angels, he built the legend. Sonny Barger is a name in the outlaw biker world. As the founder of the Oakland chapter and longtime national president, Barger transformed a California motorcycle club into a global symbol of rebellion, loyalty, and controlled chaos. He wasn't just a leader, he was a legend. Born in Modesto, California in 1938, Ralph Sonny Barger had a fearless nature. He dropped out of school in the 10th grade, faked his age to join the Army at 16, and was kicked out when they found out. But that rejection didn't break him. It fueled his fire. Inspired by the bad boys of Hollywood in The Wild One, Barger set out to create his own outlaw brotherhood. No rules, no limits, just the open road and loyalty above all else. In 1957, he founded the Oakland chapter of the Hells Angels. Under his ruthless, strategic leadership, the Angels exploded from local misfits into an international force, feared by law enforcement, revered by the counterculture, and bound by a code of silence. From brutal brawls to the bloody disaster at the Rolling Stones' Altamont concert in 1969, Barger was at the center of the storm. And he didn't just lead from behind the scenes, he had a hand in everything. His criminal record reads like a crime story: heroin possession, gun trafficking, dark conspiracy. In the late 80s, he was convicted of conspiring to blow up a rival biker gang's clubhouse and spent 4 years in federal prison. Even cancer couldn't stop him. After losing his vocal cords to throat cancer, he continued to ride, speaking through a hole in his neck and wearing a custom helmet to keep the wind out. By the time he died in 2022, Barger had spent more than a decade behind bars and more than half a century behind the wheel. But for him, it was all part of the life he chose and built. His story is the backbone of the Hells Angels' legacy. Thomas Heath, the time bomb inside the Hells Angels. Thomas Heath wasn't just a biker with a patch. He was a powder keg with a short fuse, and his crimes left a trail of destruction that even the Hells Angels couldn't ignore. A longtime enforcer for the Ventura chapter of the club, Heath made violence a way of life, making headlines with bombings, assaults, and chilling threats. When he was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison at age 64, his place in criminal history was sealed. Heath's name first appeared in the blood in the 1970s when he masterminded a deadly bombing during a turf war with the rival Mongols gang. In 1977, an explosion rocked a Los Angeles auto shop, killing a 15-year-old boy and a 22-year-old man, innocent bystanders in a war they had never fought. Heath was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 7 years in prison, but prison didn't change him. It only sharpened his mind. By 1992, his name was in the news again, this time for a brutal domestic assault. He was convicted of using a weapon to commit murder against his own wife and sentenced to another 7 years. Prosecutors warned that Heath wasn't just a repeat offender. He was a threat to anyone who stood in his way. He even tried to silence witnesses with threats of violence, a tactic that would become his signature move. But the worst was yet to come. In 2010, Heath was living in Ventura with a woman who asked him to leave. His response? Absolute horror. He refused to move, threatened to harm her and her son, and even said the Hells Angels would take care of it if she called the police. When law enforcement arrived, Heath doubled down, threatening the officers and showing no fear of consequences. At trial, prosecutors portrayed Heath as a violent lifer whose crimes were tied to his allegiance to the Hells Angels. His defense argued that the club had been unfairly targeted, but the evidence told a different story. With a horrific bombing, violent assault, and years of threats on his record, the court had no doubt. Heath was sentenced to 35 years to life, a punishment as severe as the fear he left behind. Even with Heath behind bars, however, the Hells Angels' violent legacy was far from over. Merl Hefernan, the Hells Angels' death. Merl Hefernan wasn't just a high-ranking Hells Angel. He was the guy they called when someone needed to disappear. Known around the club as the guy who handled the dirty work, Heffernan had built a fearsome reputation as the Hells Angels' personal cleaner, quiet, efficient, and ruthless. But in 2014, his bloody role finally came to light. It all started with the execution of Joel Silva, a member of the Sonoma County chapter who apparently had been pulling the wool over the eyes of untrustworthy people. Lured to the Fresno clubhouse under the guise of a meeting, Silva was shot and killed by a high-ranking member of the club. But his death wasn't enough. The Angels wanted him gone. That's when Merl Hefernan came calling. He contacted Levi Phipps, the manager of a Fresno funeral home, and told him to leave the crematorium open after hours. What happened next could have been taken from a Hollywood crime thriller. Armed men arrived, threw Silva's body into the furnace, nicknamed the pizza oven, and disappeared without a trace. Phipps later testified that Heffernan warned him to keep quiet, or else. And with the Hells Angels, a threat wasn't just words, it was a promise. But Silva wasn't the only one. Federal prosecutors allege that Heffernan facilitated the incineration of at least 3 more bodies, including missing cyclists Robbie Huff in 2015 and Art Correas in 2016. Phone records, witness statements, and a chilling timeline all point to one man, Heffernan. Though he was never charged with those additional disappearances, the implications were clear. He was the club's ghost maker. In October 2022, Heffernan was finally convicted, not of murder, but of obstruction of justice in the Silva case. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, a light sentence for a man suspected of helping to burn bodies to ashes. But the mystery surrounding Heffernan remains. How many victims were actually silenced in that oven? And if you thought he was cold, wait until you meet the next angel, who turned the execution into a public spectacle. Raymond Folks, the enforcer who turned personal betrayal into club justice. Raymond Folks is more than a biker. He's a storm wrapped in leather and fury. As president of the Sonoma County Hells Angels, Folks doesn't lead by brotherly love. He leads by violence, intimidation, and absolute control. His nickname isn't just a label, it's a warning. And when someone betrays him, the results are nothing short of brutal. One of his club brothers made the grave mistake of having an affair with Folks's common-law wife. For Rain Man, it wasn't just a personal matter. It was a betrayal. The man was lured into a warehouse where Folks and several other members carried out a brutal beating intended not just to hurt, but also to humiliate and destroy. But Folks wasn't done yet. He took his rage out on the man's wife, attacking her and threatening her life in a desperate attempt to keep her quiet. It wasn't just revenge, it was calculated terror. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. According to the Justice Department, Folks operated as a crime boss, not a biker. He was deeply involved in a larger extortion network that involved violence, weapons, and witness intimidation. His methods weren't just about revenge, they were about maintaining dominance within a criminal empire. Finally, justice caught up. A federal jury convicted Folks on multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit extortion, assault with a deadly weapon in furtherance of extortion, and witness intimidation. The brutal beating in the warehouse was not a single attack. It was part of a larger strategy to maintain fear within the club's ranks. Folks now faces up to 60 years in prison, a fitting sentence for a man who ruled with his fists, threats, and pure grit. Raymond Folks wasn't just feared. He was unforgettable. His brutal brand of justice left scars on the club and everyone around him. Now facing decades behind bars, his legacy serves as a chilling reminder: in the world of the Hells Angels, loyalty has a price and betrayal is paid in blood. How many years do you think they deserve? Were their actions motivated by power, or was there something darker behind them? And of all the names we mentioned, who do you think is the most dangerous? Share your thoughts in the comments. We are listening. Thanks for watching the whole video. Stay tuned for more exciting stories waiting for you to discover that will definitely not disappoint you.